Hello there. How are you tonight? Feeling a little sleepy? Good, because tonight we're diving headfirst into the silken sheets of history where crowns were heavy, corsets were tighter, and royal scandals were steamier than a Turkish bathhouse at midnight. Forget lullabies and sheep counting. This is your bedtime story for grown-ups with a taste for treachery, tiaras, and tantalizing tales of queens who ruled not just with iron fists, but with velvet gloves and wicked grins. These weren't your average monarchs sipping tea and waving politely from balconies. No, these were women who turned kingdoms into boudoirs, diplomacy into flirtation, and sometimes, just sometimes, used their lovers as pawns, poison, or pillow talk. So fluff your pillow, dim the lights, and prepare to be seduced by history. Because once upon a time, queens were very, very naughty. Once upon a time in Constantinople, where the streets smelled of incense, ambition, and occasionally goat, a woman named Theodora was rewriting the rules of Power One scandal at a time. She didn't start as a queen. Oh no. She started as something far more interesting. A burlesque performer, an actress, and according to some very cranky historienza, woman of loose morals, which, in Byzantine terms, meant she had opinions, talent, and the audacity to use both. Theodora's wild youth, theater, feathers, and flamingo tricks born around 500 AD. Theodora grew up in the shadow of the Hippodrome, the massive stadium where chariot races and public spectacles ruled the day. Her father was a bear keeper. Yes, really, and her early life was anything but royal. By her teens, she was performing pantomimes that made Roman senators blush and bishops clutch their pearls. One of her most infamous acts involved dancing with very few clothes and allegedly using live geese in ways that would make modern veterinarians faint. But Theodora wasn't just a performer. She was a provocateur. Her shows were political, satirical, and wildly popular. She mocked the elite, seduced the crowd, and made herself unforgettable. Theodora meets Justinian. Love, lust, and legal loopholes enter Justinian, a rising star in the Byzantine political scene. He was smart, ambitious, and completely smitten with Theodora. Their love story was the stuff of scandalous legend. A future emperor falling for a woman the law said he couldn't marry. But Justinian wasn't just any man. He was a man who changed the law to marry her. That's right. He literally rewrote imperial legislation to make Theodora his empress. Talk about commitment. Their wedding shocked the court. Nobles whispered. Priests frowned. But Justinian didn't care. He saw in Theodora not just beauty, but brilliance. Empress Theodora. The power behind the purple. Once crowned, Theodora didn't fade into the background. She became one of the most powerful women in Byzantine history. She advised Justinian, influenced policy, and crushed rebellions with the same flair she once used on stage. During the Nika Ryotsa massive uprising that nearly toppled the empire, Justinian considered fleeing. Theodora, in full empress mode, reportedly said, "Purple is the noblest shroud." Translation: I'd rather die in royal robes than run like a coward. That pep talk kept Justinian in power. Theodora's courage saved the empire. Scandalous rumors and historical shade, of course. Not everyone loved her. Some historians, especially the salty Procopius, wrote a secret book called The Secret History that painted Theodora as a depraved seductress who did unspeakable things with fruit, birds, and senators. Was it true? Probably not, but it makes for excellent bedtime gossip. Theodora's legacy, from courtesan to Queen Theodora, died in 548 AD, likely of cancer, but her legacy lived on. She was canonized as a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Yes, really. And today, she's remembered as a feminist icon, a political genius, and a woman who turned scandal into sovereignty. She proved that your past doesn't define your future, and that, sometimes, the most powerful queens start in the most unexpected places. If Theodora was scandalous, Eleanor of Aquitaine was downright revolutionary. Born around 1122 in one of the richest duchies in France, Eleanor didn't just inherit land, she inherited power, and she knew exactly how to use it. She was beautiful, brilliant, and bold. She spoke multiple languages, read Latin, and could outwit any noble in her court. But what made Eleanor truly unforgettable was her ability to turn love into politics and politics into poetry. The Duchess who dazzled Europe at just 15, Eleanor became Duchess of Aquitaine, one of the most coveted titles in Europe. Within months, she married King Louis VII of France, becoming queen. But Louis was, let's say, spiritually inclined. He preferred monasteries to masquerades, and Eleanor, she preferred everything else. Their marriage was rocky. She accompanied him on the Second Crusade, where she allegedly wore armor and led her own troops. The church was scandalized. Louis was horrified. Eleanor was radiant. Eventually, their marriage was annulled. The official reason, consanguinity. The real reason, Eleanor was too much queen for Louis to handle. Enter Henry II. Passion, power, and pandemonium, not one to waste time. Eleanor married Henry Plantagenet, soon to be King Henry II of England. Together, they ruled a vast empire stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees. They also had 8 children, including 2 future kings, Richard the Lionheart and John, yes, that John. But Eleanor wasn't just a royal baby factory. Seal was a political force. She governed Aquitaine independently, hosted courts of love, and surrounded herself with poets, philosophers, and scandalously attractive knights. Royal strategy. Eleanor's court in Poitiers became legendary. It was a place where women judged romantic disputes. Troubadours sang of forbidden love, and flirtation was elevated to an art form. She helped popularize the concept of courtly lover, stylized, often illicit form of romance that emphasized longing, chivalry, and emotional torment. Think medieval soap opera, but with more lute solos. Was it all innocent? Not likely. Rumors swirled about Eleanor's affairs, her influence over young knights, and her ability to bend hearts and laws alike. Rebellion and royal revenge. Eventually, Eleanor's relationship with Henry soured. He took mistresses. She took action. In 1173, she supported her sons in a rebellion against their father. That's right, she helped lead a revolt against the King of England, Henry I. Eleanor was imprisoned for 16 years. But even in captivity, she remained a legend. When Henry died, Eleanor returned to power, acting as regent for her son Richard the Lionheart. While he was off crusading, she negotiated treaties, arranged marriages, and kept the kingdom intact all while in her 70s. Eleanor's legacy. The queen who loved too loudly, Eleanor, died in 1204. Having lived through 2 kings, 2 marriages, multiple wars, and more drama than a season of Game of Thrones. She was buried in Fontevraud Abbey, next to Henry, though one imagines she'd have preferred a bit more distance. Her legacy, a queen who refused to be silenced. She turned love into law, poetry into power, and scandal into strategy. Isabella of France didn't come to England to play nice. Born around 1295 to the King of France, she was married off to Edward II of England, man more interested in his male favorites than his queen. From the start, Isabella was humiliated. Edward lavished gifts and titles on his lover, Piers Gaveston, while Isabella was left out in the cold literally. At her coronation, Edward ignored her and walked hand in hand with Gaveston, medieval shade at its finest. The queen turns predator. Isabella waited. She watched. And when Gaveston was executed by angry nobles, she began plotting. Edward replaced Gaveston with another favorite, Hugh Despenser, who was even worse, greedy, cruel, and controlling. Isabella had enough. She fled to France, seduced a rebel lord named Roger Mortimer, and returned to England with an army. Together, they overthrew Edward in 1327. What happened next? Edward was imprisoned and possibly murdered in a way so gruesome it's still debated. Let's just say it involved a red-hot poker and royal revenge. Queen in all but name. Isabella ruled England through her son, Edward III, while Mortimer acted as her coroner and lover. They lived lavishly through wild parties and made enemies fast. Eventually, Edward III grew tired of their antics. He staged a coup, executed Mortimer, and placed Isabella under house arrest. She lived out her days in quiet luxury, never punished, never forgotten. Joanna, the first of Naples, was born in 1326 into a world of silk, daggers, and dynastic chaos. By the time she was crowned queen, at just 15, she had already been married off to her cousin, Andrew of Hungary, political match with all the chemistry of a wet sponge and twice the danger. Andrew wasn't popular, awkward, and ambitious. Joanna's court despised him, and Joanna, she tolerated him until she didn't. A honeymoon from hell in 1345. Andrew was found hanging from a balcony, strangled by conspirators. The murder was brutal, public, and suspiciously convenient. Rumors swirled that Joanna had ordered a door, at least smiled as it happened. The Hungarian royal family was furious. They accused Joanna of regicide and sent troops to invade Naples. Joanna fled to Avignon, pleaded her case to the Pope, and shockingly was acquitted. She returned to Naples with her crown intact and her reputation, well, slightly bloodstained. 4 husbands, 1 throne. Joanna didn't stop at one marriage. She married 3 more times, each union more politically tangled than the last. Louis of Taranto, her second husband, who helped her reclaim her throne, but ruled like a tyrant. James IV of Majorca, her third, who was charming but powerless. Otto of Brunswick, her fourth, who stood by her during her final downfall. Each marriage brought drama, betrayal, and whispers of poison. Court gossip painted Joanna as a femme fatale, beautiful, cunning, and possibly lethal. The final act. In her later years, Joanna faced rebellion, excommunication, and invasion. She supported the wrong pope during a schism, angering powerful enemies. In 1382, her cousin Charles of Durazzo stormed Naples, captured Joanna, and according to legend, had her strangled with a silken cord. A queen to the end, she died in royal fashion, betrayed, defiant, and draped in velvet. Catherine the Great wasn't born royal. She was born Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, a minor German princess with a sharp mind and a sharper ambition. When she arrived in Russia at age 14 to marry the heir to the throne, she was fluent in French, obsessed with philosophy, and ready to conquer more than just hearts. Her husband, Peter III, was, let's say, a walking disaster. He played with toy soldiers, idolized Prussian enemies, and treated Catherine like a decorative vase. She, meanwhile, was busy learning Russian, winning over the court, and quietly plotting her rise. The coup of the century in 1762, Catherine staged a coup. With the help of her lover and a few loyal guards, she overthrew Peter and declared herself Empress of Russia. Peter was arrested and mysteriously died days later. Catherine claimed innocence. History raised an eyebrow. But once on the throne, Catherine didn't just rule, she reigned. She modernized Russia, corresponded with Voltaire, expanded the empire, and built schools, hospitals, and libraries. She was a political powerhouse wrapped in silk and strategy. Lovers, letters, and libertines, Catherine had many lovers. Some say a dozen, others say hundreds. She didn't hide them. She rewarded them with titles, estates, and pensions. Her favorite, Gregory Potemkin, was more than a fling. He was her partner in politics and passion. Their letters were steamy, witty, and filled with affection. Potemkin may have even helped her select future lovers. Like a royal matchmaker with benefits. Was Catherine promiscuous? Maybe. Was she judged for it? Absolutely. But unlike most monarchs, she owned her desires, never let them define her reign. The Horse Rumor. A historical hit job. Let's address the infamous myth that Catherine died while trying to engage romantically with a horse. It's false. Completely fabricated. Likely spread by enemies after her death to tarnish her legacy. The real cause: a stroke in bed at age 67. But the rumor stuck. Why? Because Catherine was a powerful woman in a patriarchal world, and nothing terrifies insecure men more than a woman who enjoys both power and pleasure. Legacy of lust and leadership. Catherine ruled for 34 years, longer than any female Russian monarch. She transformed Russia into a European power, embraced Enlightenment ideals, and proved that intelligence and sensuality weren't mutually exclusive. She was a lover, a leader, and a legend. And while the gossip may never die, neither will her legacy. Christina of Sweden was born in 1626 into a world of war, religion, and rigid expectations. From the moment she entered the world, she defied them all. The midwives were confused. Was she a boy, a girl? Christina was assigned female, but her father, King Gustavus Adolphus, raised her like a prince. She was educated in politics, philosophy, and the arts. She hunted, fenced, and debated scholars before she could legally drink wine. By the time she was crowned queen at 18, she was already a legend in the making. A queen unlike any other. Christina ruled Sweden during a time of great tension. The 30 Years' War raged across Europe, and Protestantism was the national religion. But Christina didn't care much for religious dogma or royal decorum. She refused to marry, despite pressure from every corner of Europe. Suitors came and went. Christina stayed single, stating she had no desire to be commanded by a man. She wore men's clothing walked with a swagger, and surrounded herself with artists, philosophers, and women who were, let's say, very close companions. Her court was a whirlwind of intellectual debate, dramatic flair, and whispered scandal. She was brilliant, eccentric, and unapologetically herself. Gender, gossip, and glamour. Christina's gender identity has fascinated historians for centuries. She often referred to herself in masculine terms, signed letters as king, and once declared, "I am neither man nor woman." Her relationships with women, especially her lady-in-waiting Iba Spar, were deeply affectionate and possibly romantic. Christina called Iba her bedfellow and sent her love letters that would make a troubadour blush. Was she queer? Was she gender nonconforming? Was she simply uninterested in labels? Probably all of the above. Europe, of course, was scandalized. The ultimate exit, abdication, and reinvention in 1654. Christina stunned the world. She abdicated the throne, just gave it up. No war, no rebellion, just a dramatic farewell speech and a royal mic drop. She converted to Catholicism, a huge deal for a Protestant monarch, moved to Rome, and reinvented herself as a patron of the arts. She hosted salons, collected rare books, and became besties with the Pope. Her Roman palace was filled with paintings, philosophers, and rumors. She never married, never apologized, never stopped being fascinating. Death of a legend. Christina died in 1689, still single, still scandalous, and still brilliant. She was buried in St. Peter's Basilican, of the few women to receive that honor. Her legacy, a queen who refused to be boxed in. She challenged gender norms, defied royal expectations, and lived a life of radical authenticity. Juana of Castile, born in 1479, was never meant to rule. She was the third child of Ferdinand and Isabella, the power couple who united Spain and funded Columbus's voyage. Juana was intelligent, sensitive, and deeply passionate. But history would remember her, not for her politics, but for her madness. Or was it madness at all? A love too intense. At 16, Juana was married to Philip, the handsome Duke of Burgundy. And he was, indeed, handsome, charming, golden-haired, and dangerously seductive. Juana fell hard. Their passion was volcanic, obsessive, and all-consuming. But Philip was also unfaithful. He had mistresses, flirted shamelessly, and humiliated Juana publicly. She responded with jealousy so fierce it alarmed the court. She once attacked a woman she suspected of seducing Philip, hair-pulling, screaming, the whole medieval soap opera. Still, she loved him, desperately. Death and devotion in 1506. Philip died suddenly, possibly from illness. Juana was shattered. Her grief was so profound it crossed into obsession. She refused to bury his body. Instead, She had his coffin carried with her across Castile, stopping at monasteries and sleeping beside it. She opened the casket to gaze at his face. She spoke to him. She kissed him. She ordered that no women be allowed near Reven Nunsby, 'cause she feared they might seduce his corpse. Yes, really. The people began whispering, Wana la Lokwana, the mad, imprisoned by power. Wana's mental state became a political weapon. Her father, Ferdinand, and later her son, Charles V, used her grief to justify locking her away. She was confined to the fortress of Tordesillas for nearly 50 years. She lived in isolation, surrounded by guards, with only her memories and her mourning. She was queen in name, but prisoner in reality. Was she truly mad? Or was she a woman broken by betrayal, grief, and the ruthless politics of men? Historians still debate it. Legacy of love and loss. Juana died in 1555, aged 75. She had outlived her husband, her parents, and her youth. Her story became legend, tragic tale of love so deep it defied death. She reminds us that queens were not just rulers, but women, vulnerable, passionate, and sometimes undone by the very emotions that made them human. Born in 1601, Anne of Austria was a Habsburg princess destined for the French throne. At just 14, she was married to Louis XIII, a Franza cold, distant king who barely spoke to her. Their union was political, not romantic. And Anne, a foreigner in a hostile court, was left to navigate the treacherous waters of Versailles alone. But Anne was no fool. A mask of piety. Anne played her role well. She was devout, elegant, and outwardly obedient. She attended Mass, wore modest gowns, and spoke softly. But beneath the surface, she was watching, learning, and quietly building alliances. She had enemies everywhere, especially Cardinal Richelieu, Louis XIII's powerful advisor. Richelieu suspected Anne of conspiring with Spain, her homeland, and tried to isolate her. He even intercepted her letters and spied on her chambers. Anne responded with Grace Anne's secrets. The affair of the diamond studs, Anne's most famous scandal, involved the Duke of Buckingham, a dashing English nobleman who fell madly in love with her. Their flirtation was legendary, though historians debate whether it was ever consummated. In one dramatic episode, Anne gifted Buckingham diamond studs from the king. Richelieu discovered this and plotted to expose her. But an Alison, including the fictional D'Artagnan in The Three Musketeers, helped retrieve the jewels in time. The story became myth, immortalized by Alexandre Dumas, Queen Regent. When Louis XIII died in 1643, Anne became Queen Regent for her young son. Louis XIV, the future Sun King, and here Anne truly shined. She appointed Cardinal Mazarin as her chief minister and possibly her lover. Together, they crushed rebellions, balanced power, and protected the monarchy during the chaotic Fronde civil wars. Anne ruled with intelligence, diplomacy, and quiet strength. She was no longer the timid foreign bride. She was the mother of France's greatest king. Legacy of elegance and strategy. Anne of Austria died in 1666, remembered as a queen who endured humiliation, betrayal, and war, but never lost her dignity. She mastered the art of survival in a world that wanted her silenced. Her story is one of transformation from pawn to power player. Born in 1626, Christina of Sweden was a surprise from the start. Her father, King Gustavus Adolphus, had desperately wanted a male heir. When Christina was born, she was mistaken for a boy, so strong were her features, so confident her presence. Her father declared, "She shall be raised as a prince," and she was. A mind like fire, Christina was brilliant. She devoured books, spoke multiple languages, and corresponded with philosophers like Descartes, whom she invited to her court. She studied politics, art, theology, and science. Her court became a hub of intellectual energy. But Christina had no interest in traditional queenly duties. She hated embroidery, refused to wear corsets, and walked with the swagger of a soldier. She dressed in men's clothing. She hunted, fenced, and cursed. She rejected marriage outright. "I have no desire to be commanded," she said. Abdication and scandal in 1654, at just 28. Christina did the unthinkable. She abdicated the throne. She claimed exhaustion and poor health, but the truth was deeper. Christina wanted freedom. She wanted to travel, study, and live without the constraints of monarchy. She shocked Europe again by converting to Catholicism, abandoning Sweden's staunch Lutheranism. This was political heresy. She left her homeland and settled in Rome, where she became a patron of the arts and a celebrity of scandal. A life unconventional, Christina never married. She surrounded herself with male favorites and female companions, sparking endless rumors about her sexuality. She wrote poetry, staged plays, and collected art. She once said, "I am neither man nor woman. I am Christina." Her gender identity and sexual orientation remain debated, but what's clear is that Christina lived unapologetically, refusing to be boxed in by society's expectations. Legacy of defiance. Christina died in 1689. Buried in the Vatican, a rare honor for a woman and a Protestant-born queen. Her tomb lies near popes, a testament to her extraordinary life. She remains one of history's most enigmatic royals, a queen who chose intellect over power, freedom over tradition, and selfhood over conformity. Born in 1835 to a modest Manchu family, Cixi had no royal blood, but she had ambition and she knew how to wield it. At 16, she entered the Forbidden City as a low-ranking concubine to Emperor Shanfeng. She wasn't the most beautiful, but she was sharp, observant, and politically astute. When she gave birth to the emperor's only son, her status skyrocketed. The rise of the Dragon Lady. In 1861, the emperor died, leaving behind a child heir. Cixi saw her moment. She allied with the emperor's widow, Empress Dowager Xian, and staged a palace coup. They seized the imperial seal, outmaneuvered the regents, and declared themselves co-regents for the young emperor. Cixi was now Empress Dowagerand, the real power behind the throne. She ruled from behind a silk screen, issuing orders while male officials bowed and obeyed. For nearly 50 years, she would dominate Chinese politics. Ruthless and reformist Cixi was no passive figure. She crushed rebellions and executed rivals, manipulated court factions with precision, modernized China's military and infrastructure, supported the construction of railways, telegraphs, and schools, sponsored the first Chinese female journalists. But she was also deeply conservative. She resisted democratic reforms and was blamed for the disastrous Boxer Rebellion, which led to foreign invasions and humiliation. Her critics called her a tyrant. Her supporters saw her as a savior of the Qing dynasty. The woman behind the curtain, Cixi, loved luxury. She bathed in milk, wore elaborate silk robes, and dined on exotic delicacies. Her court was a theater of elegance and intimidation. She was known for her sharp wit and icy stare. One official fainted after she merely raised an eyebrow. Despite her power, she never ruled as emperor. Legacy of complexity. Cixi died in 1908, just one day after the death of her chosen successor. Some say she orchestrated both deaths to ensure her legacy. She left behind a China on the brink of revolution, but also one that had survived foreign threats, internal chaos, and dynastic collapse thanks to her iron will. Today, she's remembered as one of the most powerful women in Chinese history. Symbol of female authority in a world that tried to silence her. Born in 1778, Ranavalona was not born royal. Her father was a commoner who saved the king's life, earning a place at court. When the king died, Ranavalona, through cunning and alliances, seized the throne in 1828. She wasn't the rightful heir, but she was the most ruthless, and she would rule Madagascar for 33 years, becoming one of the most feared monarchs in African history. A fortress against foreigners, Ranavalona inherited a kingdom under pressure. European powers, especially France and Britain, wanted influence, trade, and control. She said no. She expelled Christian missionaries, banned foreign customs, and executed converts. She rejected Western medicine, technology, and diplomacy. Her motto was clear: Madagascar for the Malagasy. She preserved her nation's independence, but at a terrible cost. Justice by ordeal. Ranavalona's justice system was brutal. Suspected criminals were forced to undergo the tangina, or deleting poison from the tangina nut. If they vomited, they were innocent. If they died, they were guilty. Tens of thousands perished under this system. She also used forced labor, mass executions, and public torture to maintain control. Her reign was marked by fear, but also by stability. No foreign power dared invade. A queen in command, Ranavalona lived lavishly. She built palaces, wore elaborate silk garments, and held court with dramatic flair. She was deeply spiritual, consulting shamans and ancestral spirits before making decisions. She led military campaigns herself, riding into battle and inspecting troops. Her presence was commanding, her rule absolute. Legacy of fire and iron. Ranavalona died in 1861, leaving behind a kingdom still independent but deeply scarred. Her son would reverse many of her policies, opening Madagascar to the world. Historians remain divided. Was she a nationalist hero, protecting her people from colonization, or a tyrannical despot whose paranoia cost countless lives? Perhaps she was both. She remains one of the most complex figures in African history, queen who chose sovereignty over sympathy and power over peace. Born in 1160, Tamar was the daughter of King George III of Georgia. From a young age, she was groomed to rule, but not everyone was ready for a female monarch. When her father died, Tamar was crowned in 1184, but not as queen. She was crowned King of Kings, a title reserved for male rulers. Georgia's nobles tried to control her, but Tamar had other plans. She would become one of the greatest rulers in Georgian history. A queen who led armies. Tamar wasn't just a figurehead, she was a military commander. She led campaigns against Muslim empires, expanded Georgia's borders, and turned her kingdom into a regional superpower. Her forces captured cities in Armenia, Azerbaijan, and eastern Turkey. She founded the Empire of Trebizond, a Christian stronghold on the Black Sea. Her reign was so successful that historians call it Georgia's Golden Age, a marriage rejected to appease the nobles. Tamar was forced to marry Yuri Bogolyubsky, a Russian prince. He was arrogant, abusive, and politically reckless. Tamar didn't tolerate it. She divorced him, an unheard of act for a medieval queen, and exiled him. When he tried to return with an army, she crushed him. Tamar ruled alone, with wisdom and strength. Patron of culture under Tamar's reign, Georgia flourished culturally. Poets like Shota Rustaveli wrote epic masterpieces. Churches and monasteries were built across the kingdom. Trade routes expanded, bringing wealth and diversity. Religious tolerance was practiced. Despite Tamer's deep Christian faith, she was both a warrior and a patrona, rare combination in medieval history. Legacy of light. Tamer died in 1213, mourned by her people and immortalized in legend. She was canonized as a saint by the Georgian Orthodox Church. Even today, Georgians speak of her with reverence. Streets, statues, and songs bear her name. She is remembered not just as a ruler, but as a symbol of national pride and feminine power. She was the queen who ruled like a king and never apologized for it. Born in 1583 in what is now Angola, Nzinga Mbandi was destined for greatness. Her father was king of the Ndongo people, and Nzinga grew up learning diplomacy, warfare, and the art of survival in a world increasingly threatened by European colonizers. She was sharp, multilingual, and politically savvy. And when her brother, then king, sent her to negotiate with the Portuguese, she made history. The throne incident in 1622, Nzinga met with Portuguese officials to discuss peace. They offered chairs to their own men, but not to her. A clear insult, Nzinga didn't flinch. She motioned to one of her servants, who dropped to all fours. Nzinga sat on his back, eye level with the Portuguese, and conducted the meeting with regal authority. That moment became legend, symbol of defiance, dignity, and power. Queen of two kingdoms, after her brother's death, Nzinga became queen of Ndongoland, later Matamba. She ruled both kingdoms, united rival tribes, and led a decades-long resistance against Portuguese colonization. She formed alliances with the Dutch, trained her own army, and even led troops into battle herself, sometimes dressed as a man, sometimes in full royal regalia. Nzinga was a master of guerrilla warfare and psychological strategy. She used diplomacy when needed, but never hesitated to fight. Politics, religion, and reinvention. Nzinga converted to Christianity not out of devotion, but as a political move. She took the name Ana de Souza, baptized by the Portuguese, and used her new identity to manipulate colonial expectations. She later abandoned Christianity when it no longer served her goals. Nzinga was flexible, pragmatic, and always in control of her narrative. She ruled for nearly 40 years, maintaining independence in a region surrounded by European forces. Legacy of resistance. Nzinga died in 1663, aged 80, still on the throne. Her death marked the end of an era, but her legacy lived on. Today, she is celebrated across Angola and beyond as a symbol of anti-colonial resistance, female leadership, and unapologetic strength. She was the queen who refused to kneel, refused to be conquered, and refused to be forgotten. Born in 1755 in Vienna, Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna was the youngest daughter of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. At just 14, she was married off to the awkward French Dauphin, Louis Auguste, sealing a political alliance between Austria and France. When he became King Louis XVI, she became Queen of France and the most scrutinized woman in Europe. Versailles and vanity. Marie Antoinette arrived at the Palace of Versailles, a glittering symbol of royal excess. She quickly became known for her lavish lifestyle, extravagant gowns and towering wigs, private gardens, and a mock village where she played peasant, endless parties. Gambling and theater, she was dubbed Madame as France's economy crumbled. Whether fair or not, she became the face of royal indifference. Let them eat cake. The infamous quote, "Let them eat cake," was likely never spoken by her. It first appeared in literature years before she was queen. But the myth stuck, fueling public rage. Marie Antoinette was seen as frivolous, foreign, and out of touch. Her Austrian roots didn't help, nor did her inability to produce an heir for several years. Revolution and ruin. By the late 1780s, France was boiling with unrest. The French Revolution erupted in 1789, and the monarchy was under siege. Marie Antoinette tried to flee with her family in 1791, but they were caught. Her image as a traitor solidified. In 1792, the monarchy was abolished. Louis XVI was executed in January 1793. 9 months later, Marie Antoinette followed the final walk. On October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette was paraded through Paris in a common cart, hair cut short, hands bound. She faced the guillotine with stoic dignity. Her last words, allegedly, "Pardon me, sir, I did not mean to do it," after stepping on her executioner's foot. She was 37. Legacy of contradictions, Marie Antoinette remains one of history's most polarizing figures. A scapegoat for a collapsing regime, a fashion icon and cultural influencer, a tragic queen caught in the storm of revolution. Her story is a cautionary tale about image, power, and the cost of being misunderstood. Born in 1835 to a modest Manchu family, Cixi, pronounced sushi, entered the imperial palace at age 16 as a lower-ranking concubine to the Xianfeng emperor. But she wasn't just another face in the harem. She was observant, ambitious, and politically astute. When she bore the emperor's only surviving son, her status skyrocketed. And when the emperor died in 1861, Cixi made her move. The coup behind the curtain, Cixi joined forces with the emperor's widow and staged a palace coup, ousting the regents who were supposed to govern on behalf of her young son. She became Empress Dowager, ruling from behind a silk screen, literally. Male officials would kneel and speak to her through a curtain, never seeing her face. For decades, she wielded power through her son, and later her nephew, manipulating court politics with unmatched skill. Modernization and manipulation. Cixi's reign was marked by contradiction. She modernized China's military, infrastructure, and education system. She fought corruption, built railways, and supported the arts. But she also clung to tradition, resisted democratic reforms, and suppressed dissent. She was blamed for the failure of the 100 Days Reform in 1898, and for backing the Boxer Rebellion, a violent anti-foreigner uprising that ended in disaster. Yet she was also a master of survival, of maneuvering rivals, foreign powers, and reformers alike. The private Empress Cixi was known for her opulence and taste. She loved jade, silk, and elaborate robes. She had a passion for Peking opera and gardens. She maintained a strict beauty regimen and was said to have over 3,000 dresses. Despite her luxury, she was deeply involved in state affairs, reading every document, issuing edicts, and shaping policy. Final act and legacy before her death in 1908. Cixi made a surprising turn. She appointed Pui, a toddler, as the next emperor, setting the stage for the final chapter of imperial China. She also quietly approved reforms she had once resisted, including abolishing foot-binding and modernizing education. Cixi died just one day after her chosen heir's predecessor, leaving behind a legacy as complex as the empire she ruled. Empress of Paradox. Cixi was a conservative reformer, a ruthless strategist, a cultural patron, a woman who ruled in a man's world. She remains one of the most controversial and fascinating figures in Chinese history, symbol of both imperial decline and female power. Born in 69 BCE, Cleopatra VII Philopator was not just a beauty, she was a brilliant linguist, shrewd politician, and the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which had governed Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. She spoke at least 9 languages, including Egyptian, a rarity among her Greek-descended family, and was deeply educated in philosophy, astronomy, and medicine. A queen in crisis, Cleopatra inherited a kingdom in turmoil. Egypt was rich, but politically vulnerable, caught between Roman ambitions and internal strife. She was initially co-ruler with her brother Ptolemy XIII, but palace intrigue forced her into exile. Cleopatra didn't sulk, she strategized. Enter Julius Caesar. In 48 BCE, Cleopatra famously had herself smuggled into Julius Caesar's quarters wrapped in a rug. The stunt worked. Caesar was impressed, and the two became lovers. With Caesar's support, Cleopatra reclaimed her throne and gave birth to Caesarion, Caesar's son. She ruled Egypt with renewed strength, blending Greek and Egyptian traditions. Mark Antony and the power play. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra aligned with Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful generals. Their relationship was both romantic and political. Together, they had 3 children, lived lavishly in Alexandria, formed a powerful Eastern alliance against Rome. But their union enraged Octavian, later Augustus, Caesar's heir. He declared war, framing Cleopatra as a manipulative foreign queen. The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra's forces were defeated at the Battle of Actium. Their fate was sealed. As Octavian closed in, Antony committed suicide, believing Cleopatra was already dead. When she found him dying, she cradled him in her arms. The death that became legend, Cleopatra, followed soon after. According to legend, she allowed an asp, venomous snake, to bite her, choosing death over humiliation. Modern historians debate the method poison, snakebite, or staged suicide, but the symbolism endures. She died in 30 BCE at age 39, and with her, 3,000 years of Egyptian pharaonic rule came to an end. Legacy of the Nile Queen, Cleopatra was a diplomatic genius, a cultural bridge between East and West, a woman who defied Rome. She's been romanticized, vilified, and immortalized in art, literature, and film. But behind the myth was a ruler who fought fiercely for her people and her power. In the 7th century, Korea was divided into 3 kingdoms: Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla. It was a time of war, shifting alliances, and male-dominated rule. But in 630 to CE, something unprecedented happened. Sindadok, a woman, ascended the throne of Silla, becoming Korea's first reigning queen. Her rise was controversial, but her reign was transformative. A queen with cosmic vision, Seondeok was deeply interested in astronomy, believing that the stars could guide her people. She commissioned the construction of Kiamseongdae, the oldest surviving astronomical observatory in East Asia, built from 362 stones. It symbolized the days of the lunar year and stood as a testament to her scientific curiosity and strategic foresight. Architecture and enlightenment. Seondeok understood the power of beauty and symbolism. She built temples and pagodas to promote Buddhism and unify her people, commissioned the 9-story pagoda at Hwangyongsa Temple to ward off foreign invaders, encouraged education and art, turning Silla into a cultural beacon. Her rule blended spiritual depth with political savvy. Wisdom and prophecy. Legends say Seondeok had a gift for prophecy. One tale tells of her receiving peony seeds from China. She noticed the flowers had no fragrance and predicted that the Chinese envoy was mocking her, suggesting that Silla had beauty, but no substance. She responded by strengthening her kingdom's defenses and cultural identity. Challenges and triumph, Siandiak faced fierce opposition from nobles who doubted a woman's ability to rule. Rebellions flared, and neighboring kingdoms threatened invasion. But she held firm using diplomacy, alliances, and strategic marriages to maintain stability. She ruled for 15 years, laying the groundwork for Silla's eventual unification of the Korean peninsula. Legacy of Light Queen Siandiak died in 647 CE. But her legacy endured. She proved that intellect and vision could triumph over prejudice. She elevated science, religion, and culture. She inspired future queens and leaders across Asia. Her reign marked the beginning of Silla's golden age, and she remains a symbol of wisdom, resilience, and enlightened leadership. Born in 1778, Ranavalona, I wasn't born into royalty. Her father was a commoner who saved the life of the future king. As a reward, she was adopted into the royal family and married the prince. When her husband, King Radama I, died in 1828, Ranavalona seized power despite rivals and tradition. She declared herself Queen of Madagascar, and her reign would become one of the most dramatic in African history. Isolation and independence, Ranavalona was fiercely protective of Madagascar's sovereignty. She expelled Christian missionaries, severed ties with European powers, banned foreign customs, and influence. Her goal: to preserve Malagasy culture and resist colonization. She believed foreign influence was a threat to her people's identity, and she acted with brutal resolve. Rule by fear. Ranavalona's reign was marked by harsh punishments, forced labor, and public executions. She revived the traditional Tangina or Dila trial by poison to root out criminals and dissenters. Estimates suggest tens of thousands died under her rule, though numbers vary widely. She maintained control through fear, loyalty, and an unyielding grip on power. Engineering and resistance. Despite her brutality, Ranavalona was also a builder and strategist. She oversaw the construction of palaces, roads, and fortresses. She maintained a strong military. Repelling multiple foreign invasions, she preserved Madagascar's independence for decades. While much of Africa fell under colonial rule, her resistance to European domination was rare and remarkable. A queen of contradictions, Ranavalona was a nationalist hero to some, a tyrant to others. A woman who ruled alone in a world of empires. She was deeply spiritual, consulting royal ancestors and traditional healers. Yet, she was also pragmatic, seizing diplomacy when needed, and ruthlessness when threatened. Death and legacy. Ranavalona died in 1861 after a 33-year reign, one of the longest in African history. Her death marked the beginning of Madagascar's slow slide toward colonization. But her legacy is fiercely debated. Was she a defender of culture or a despot, a freedom fighter or a fearsome ruler? What is undeniable is that she stood her ground against the tide of empire, left a mark that still echoes across Madagascar. Born around 1160 CE, Tamar was the daughter of King George III of Georgia. From a young age, she was groomed for leadership, but when her father named her Korol, many nobles balked. A woman on the throne, unthinkable. But Tamar didn't just rule, she redefined monarchy. Crowned twice when her father died in 1184, Tamar became the sole ruler of Georgia. To solidify her authority, she was crowned twice, once by her father's decree, Cain, again by the church, symbolizing divine and political legitimacy. She was the first woman to rule Georgia in her own right, and she ruled with wisdom, diplomacy, and strength. Empire builder Tamar's reign marked the golden age of Georgia. She expanded the kingdom's borders deep into Armenia, Azerbaijan, and eastern Turkey, defeated Muslim and Byzantine forces in battle, supported crusader states, and built alliances across the Christian world. Her armies were led by legendary generals like Zachariah Makarj-Dresli, and her victories earned her the title King of Kings and Queen of Queens. Queens, marriage, and independence. Tamar's nobles pressured her into marrying Yuri of Rus, a prince from Kiev. The marriage was a disaster. Yuri was abusive and power-hungry. Tamar divorced him, exiled him, and ruled alone. Her independence became a symbol of her strength and autonomy. Patron of culture and faith, Tamar was deeply religious and a patron of the Georgian Orthodox Church. She built monasteries, cathedrals, and schools, supported poets like Shota Rustaveli, whose epic, The Knight in the Panther's Skin, remains a national treasure, promoted education, art, and literature, turning Georgia into a cultural beacon. Her reign blended military might with spiritual depth. Legacy of Light Tamar died in 1213 after nearly 30 years on the throne. Her death was mourned across the Caucasus, and her legacy endured for centuries. She is remembered as a warrior queen, a cultural icon, a saint in the Georgian Orthodox Church to this day. Georgians refer to her as King Tamar, not to deny her womanhood, but to honor her unmatched power. Born in 1838 in Honolulu, Lily Ukulani was raised in a royal household steeped in tradition, music, and diplomacy. She was educated in Western and Hawaiian subjects, fluent in English, and deeply committed to her people. In 1891, after the death of her brother King Kalkua, she became Queen of the Hawaiian Kingdom, the first and only woman to rule Hawaii as monarch. Her reign would be short but unforgettable. A nation under siege by the late 19th century, Hawaii was under intense pressure from foreign powers, especially the United States. American businessmen had gained control over much of the island's economy, particularly sugar plantations. Lily Ukulani sought to restore power to the monarchy and protect native Hawaiian rights. She proposed a new constitution that would restore voting rights to native Hawaiians, reduce the influence of foreign elites, reassert royal authority. But her efforts were met with fierce opposition. The overthrow in 1893. A group of American and European business men backed by U.S. Marines overthrew the Hawaiian monarchy. They claimed it was to protect American interests, but it was a calculated move to annex the islands. Lily Ukulani was forced to abdicate under threat of violence. She hoped that diplomacy and justice would restore her throne. She wrote to President Grover Cleveland, who initially opposed the annexation. But political tides shifted, and Hawaii was formally annexed by the U.S. in 1898. Music as resistance. During her imprisonment in Iolani Palace, Lily Ukulani turned to music. She composed over 160 songs, including the hauntingly beautiful Aloha, Farewell to Thee, which became a symbol of Hawaiian identity and sorrow. Her music blended Western harmonies with Hawaiian lyrics, preserving culture and expressing deep emotion. Legacy of sovereignty. After her release, Lily Ukulani continued to advocate for her people. She fought for land rights and education. She wrote her memoir, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen. To tell her side of history, she remained a symbol of dignity, resistance, and aloha. She died in 1917. But her legacy lives on in every Hawaiian song, protest, and prayer for sovereignty. The queen who never gave up, Lily Ukulani, was a composer, diplomat, and patriot, a woman of peace, who chose resistance through words and music, a guardian of culture, who stood firm in the face of empire. Her story is a reminder that even in defeat, there can be grace, and even in silence, there can be song. And that's the tale of Queen Lily Ukulani, the monarch who didn't just rule a kingdom, she composed its soul. From palace politics to poetic protest, she showed us that sometimes the fiercest resistance comes with a melody. So, if you ever find yourself overthrown by sugar barons or stuck in a palace with nothing but a piano, just channel your inner queen. Write a banger and make history hum. If you liked this royal ride through heartbreak and harmony, don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe even hula your way into the comments. Until next time, may your crown stay polished, your playlist stay regal, and your revolutions stay rhythmic. Good night, noble subjects.